Hello students, welcome to Unacademy platform. This platform provides daily live classes, structured courses. There are live tests and quizzes, and you have unlimited access on subscription. You can also download this Unacademy learning app and daily live classes, structured courses, all that are available in this very platform also. This is about me. This is my Unacademy profile link, and this is my Telegram link. So if you face any doubt in my lectures, you can ping me here. I will answer your doubts. Along with me, these are the top educators in Unacademy, and you can go and see their courses. Here you have different plans to subscribe. If you go with Plus, there are live classes, test series, unlimited practice, and structured schedule. And if you choose Iconic, you get these additional benefits of personal coach, daily mails, question answer practice, study planner, and personalized feedback. Now all these plans, which are there for subscription, all are available at 10% discount if you apply this very code, that is Amit PS. And again, these are the different plans of different durations. You can select according to your requirement, and again these are available at 10% discount if you have to apply this very code, that is Amit PS. These are different optional subjects available on the platform, and I am taking political science and international relations. Again, these are different plans for subscription, and all these are available at 10% discount if you apply this very code, that is Amit PS. Okay, so we started discussing hops, and we are done with this perspective of hops, and then we did methodology. We talked about resolutive compositive method, and then we also talked about laws of natural rights, covenant, sovereign power, why, what are the powers of sovereign. All these has been done. Then we started notes on sovereignty, and we studied about different types of sovereignty. Okay, we also saw the difference between Hoda and Hobbes. So these are the things that we have covered. Now we're starting with the Austin's conception of political sovereignty, which is used as viewed as monarch in the parliament. So we are going to complete that. Okay. And others, Austin's conception of political sovereignty is which is used as viewed as monarch in the parliament, and other scholars who linked sovereignty to democracy and constitutionalism. So yes, Austin is one who links sovereignty with democracy and constitutionalism. Okay, so that is a different kind of sovereignty that you have in Austin. Okay, now as I told you about the different thinkers theorizing differently on the conception of sovereignty, so this is about that. So all such thinkers, it is referring to Bodha, then Hobbes, then Austin. Okay, these are the different thinkers who have theorized on conception of sovereignty. They had one thing in common despite of their differences in sovereignty. That is, sovereignty could be and should be located in determinate body. Okay, so this is I have discussed in previous class. Now we are going to see sovereignty in Hobbes. That is also that we have started discussing, and we have discussed the initial points. Okay, so this was discussed. The creation of sovereign in Hobbes is through a covenant, that is contract. Okay, this has been discussed. However, Hobbes also talks of another kind of sovereignty, which is sovereignty by acquisition. There I explained you how sovereignty by acquisition is different. and why those people who belong to different territory are going to accept the sovereignty of this very sovereign only because they are going to get security. Okay, so here we needed to come out with further details, and I'm continuing with that. So victor, a victor means someone who is going to acquire, okay, possession of that very territory. Victor provides security in exchange of obedience. Okay, so if the people in that very territory are going to be obedient, then they will be provided with security. According to Hobbes, fear is no less a basis of obligation than free consent. Okay, so what is the meaning here? That sovereignty by institution, understand, as Hobbes comes out with two kinds of sovereignty. First is sovereignty by institution. This is something which is visible in creation of a sovereign, which is then outcome of the contract. Okay, so here the basis of obligation is what? Free consent. How? People have actually given their consent, okay, and it is only through their consent here that contract is being signed, and that is leading to the creation of sovereign. That is why it is being called sovereignty by institution. Here the basis of obligation is free consent because those who were making that very contract were freely consenting to it. Okay. Now, why I think that fear is also a basis, and where it is seen in which kind of sovereignty? So it is clear that this kind of basis is to be seen in second kind of sovereignty that he is telling about. That is a sovereignty by acquisition. So in the acquired territory, sovereign is going to exercise its sovereignty in exchange of the security that he is going to offer to the individuals. Okay. Now, why they are going to submit to the sovereign? Because they want security. Okay, and there you find the fear to be the obligation, to be the basis of obligation. So, in sovereignty by institution, you have consent as as the base for obligation, and in sovereignty by acquisition, you have fear as the basis for the obligation. I think this is clear. Now, see that in fact, governance without souls are mere words. This is coming from Hobbes, are mere words and of no strength to secure a man at all. So he is actually talking about the relevance of fear. Okay, in the exercise of in the exercise of in the exercise of sovereignty. Okay, so that is what it means here. Governance without souls are mere words and no strength to the secure man at all. So the foundation of sovereignty is based on both fear as well as consent. Fear in case of sovereignty by acquisition and consent in case of sovereignty by institution. Now further see that Hobbes acknowledges only one difference between two kinds of sovereignty. And what is that difference? Which lies in the fact that sovereignty by institution, first kind of sovereignty, was enacted by fear of fellow human beings. See, this is very good statement that sovereignty by institution that was uh, that is the first kind of sovereignty that Hobbes proposes is enacted by the fear of fellow human beings. Okay, here he is referring to the condition in a state of nature, while sovereignty by acquisition is due to invading sovereign sphere. Okay, So, in sovereignty by institution, you have seen people who are actually the slaves of their passion, according to Hobbes, are also endowed with reason, and that propels them to come out with this very contract. Okay, now the motivating factor for this contract is the fear from fellow human beings. Okay, fear from those human beings, fear from those human beings who are हाँ कुलदीप का क्वेश्चन है कि लॉक का पॉलिटिकल आइडिया एक्चुअली लॉक को हम थोड़ा सा बाद में समझेंगे हॉब्स के कुछ एस्पेक्ट को समझने के बाद ओके तो आप इसमें लॉक के पूरे आइडिया को अच्छे से समझने के लिए आपको जरूरी है हॉब्स का पूरा अच्छे से समझ लें इसलिए हॉब्स के उस आइडियाज को समझ रहे हैं जिसको हमें यूज है लॉक के आइडिया को समझने के लिए तो लॉक के आइडिया को समझने के लिए जिस 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 कॉन्सेप्ट की जरूरत है उसमें हॉब्स के कॉन्ट्रैक्ट का आइडिया इंपॉर्टेंट है ओके और ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट का आइडिया में मॉडिफिकेशंस ही आपको लॉक के केस में दिखेंगे तो एक्चुअली आपको मदद मिल सके लॉक के आइडिया को समझने के लिए इसलिए हॉब्स के आइडिया को यहाँ पास एक्सप्लेन किया जा रहा है मुझे लगता है कि कुलदीप का आंसर हो चुका है कुलदीप को अपने क्वेश्चन का आंसर मिल गया है Hobbes acknowledges only one difference between two kind of sovereignty. Okay, तो पहला जो है sovereignty of institution. वहां पास हमने देखा कि state of nature में जो fellow human beings हैं, okay, fellow human beings हैं, उनके डर की वजह से सोवरेन को क्रिएट किया जा रहा है कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के थ्रू ओके और सोवरेनिटी बाय एक्विजिशन में जो सोवरेनिटी का बेसिस है वो फियर है और वो फियर किसका है सोवरेन क्या जो सोवरेन वहां पास अटैक करने आ रहा है ओके तो जहां पास जिस टेरिटरी में सोवरेन अटैक करने जा रहा था उस टेरिटरी के लोगों ने अपनी सिक्योरिटी के बदले में उसकी सोवरेनिटी को एक्सेप्ट कर लिया तो सोवरेन की सोवरेनिटी एक्सेप्ट की जा रही है उस एक्वायर्ड टेरिटरी में लोगों के द्वारा ताकि लोगों को लग रहा है कि अब वो सिक्योर हो जाएंगे ओके इन हॉब्सियन स्कीम्स सोवरेनिटी इज एब्सोल्यूट okay so sovereignty is absolute in Hobbes scheme it is indivisible it cannot be divided it is inalienable it cannot be taken away and it is perpetual that is it exists for all time to come okay so these are the features of sovereignty in Hobbesian scheme okay sovereignty is absolute because it is undivided indivisible and which cannot be taken away and which is going to persist for all time to come this is about the sovereignty of Hobbes here it is so in the sense that there is no limitation of sovereignty by such factors like rights of the subject or the customs and traditions. Now you see the difference between Hobbesian scheme of sovereignty and Boda's scheme of sovereignty. Okay, so when it comes to Boda's scheme of sovereignty, sovereign is beneath the will of God. If you are able to recall my previous lecture, then sovereignty, in Boda's scheme, what happened? That he made sure that sovereign is beneath or below the will of the God. Okay, and by will of the God, he meant simply religion. Although sovereign has to abide by natural law, but he alone is the interpreter of natural law. Okay, so natural law, the actually this is very much evident and to be found in almost every theory of Hobbes that he actually comes with conception of natural law, but every time he is going to cripple it by his larger scheme of sovereignty, of sovereign, okay, or the absolutist nature of sovereign. So, because of the absolutist nature of sovereign, again you are seeing that natural law, the concept of natural law, is becoming actually insignificant, infertile. Okay, so it loses its meaning because it is the sovereign who is going to interpret the natural law. No action of sovereign can be questioned on the basis that it is not justful. Okay, it is so because justice consists in acting according to the promises made, and sovereign has made no promises. Okay, so sovereign has made no promises, and that is why you cannot say or you cannot claim that sovereign is or has breaking a promise, or sovereign is breaking any particular promise, because sovereign has not made any promises. Okay, and that is why you cannot say that sovereign, when actually breaks something or breaks which might be perceived as the breaking of the promise, then that is not going to be injustice. Okay, no, you understand. No one can complain that sovereign is acting wrongly. Okay, why no one can complain that sovereign is acting wrongly? Because everyone has authorized him to act on his behalf. Okay, so everyone has authorized the sovereign to act on his behalf, and that is why no one can question his actions. Okay, तो ये चीज अभी बहुत सिंपल हो गई है आपके लिए, क्योंकि यहाँ पास अगर आपने पीछे लेक्चर्स को फॉलो किया है तो सोवरेन की सारी क्वालिटीज डिस्कस हो चुकी है। तो मेरे ख्याल से ये समझना आपके लिए डिफिकल्ट नहीं है। Okay, because everyone has authorized him to act on his behalf. Okay, so that was actually the thing which was evident in case of the signing, or at the timing of the signing of the contract. Sovereign actions are the actions of his subject. Okay, sovereigns के जो action है, these are actually the actions of his subject. And how do we know that? Because it is the subject, that is the people in a state of nature, who have agreed to give or to authorize, okay, to act, uh, or who have authorized the sovereign to act on his behalf. So whatever sovereign is doing is actually doing on behalf of those very people who have created this very sovereign out of that very contract. Hobbes presents a case before individual where they have to make a choice between absolutism and anarchy. Okay, so either it will be anarchy or it will be absolutism. Getting it? In Hobbes' theory, people don't have the right to rebel or disobey. The authorization through covenant is irrevocable and absolute. In the previous video, I think there was a mistake when I by mistake I uttered the word between absolutism and monarchy. That is not monarchy, that is actually anarchy. Okay, because monarchy, there is no significance of monarchy here. Okay, monarchy is not actually being theorized by Hobbes here. So if I uttered the word monarchy instead of anarchy, that was a mistake. Now this mistake has been corrected here in this very statement. In Hobbes' theory, people don't have right to rebel or disobey. They don't have any right to rebel and disobey. See, again, give proper attention here. Okay, because the kind of authorization that has been bestowed upon sovereign is irrevocable, and that is absolute, that cannot be taken back. And that is why Hobbes gives no opportunity to the people who made this very contract to rebel or disobey. Okay, now subjects have authorized all his actions as their own. So whatever sovereign is doing, it is going to be understood as they are coming from, or they are being done by subjects themselves. Okay, nobody can go against their own will to disobey the sovereign. Okay, is similar to going back to the state of nature. Understand this very thing, that nobody can go against their own will. This means what? That nobody can actually say that whatever sovereign is saying, that is something that we are not going to do, because whatever sovereign is saying, it is understood that this is coming from subject themselves or people themselves who have agreed to create that very sovereign in that very contract. However, it should be noted that sole purpose of the creation of sovereign is the preservation of life. Okay, I think this is clear that preservation of life was the sole purpose here. Okay, now if it is the sole purpose, and this sole purpose, if it is not met, if it is not honored or not fulfilled, then what will happen? If this very sole purpose is not fulfilled, then the moment that very preservation of life is not guaranteed, sovereign loses its legitimacy to rule. Okay, and there you will find that people have justified right to rebel against sovereign, and that is what we are going to see here. Sovereign has right to kill a person in the interest of peace and security of the Commonwealth. So, if it is about the peace and security of the Commonwealth, sovereign has full right to kill a person. But subject himself is not obliged in his life. Okay, subject himself is not obliged by this very order. Okay, so if sovereign orders someone to kill himself, in that very situation, subject can deny. Okay, subject can deny to obey him. Okay, if sovereign commands someone to kill himself, he is not bound to obey the command of the sovereign, because preservation of life is the prime concern. Okay, that is the prime motive. Subject is under complete obligation but has the right to disobey the sovereign for the right of self-preservation, because this very self-preservation was the sole purpose. It was the sole purpose of preservation of life was the sole purpose of the creation of sovereign. Now, if that very sole purpose is not being met, then what will happen? Then subject is justified in disobeying the sovereign. Okay, now understand that it must be noted, understand that it must be noted that the obligation of the subject to sovereign is understood to last as long as no longer than power lasts. Okay, and which kind of power? The kind of power which is going to be useful or helpful in the preservation of life, in preservation of life. So if sovereign is able to exercise the power which ensures the preservation of life, then till that very moment it is justified for the sovereign to exercise his agency or exercise his power or exercise his or demand the obligation. But if he loses the power to ensure the preservation of life for individuals, then that very moment he loses the legitimacy also. Okay, now I am giving you full proper time to understand it. I will suggest you to read this very thing, first 2 points, and pay full attention. Okay, now see, I think this is clear. Hence, if sovereign fails to put down a rebellion, okay, first of all, people don't have the right to rebel. Now, if in case they rebel, then what is expected of sovereign? Sovereign is supposed to put down that very rebellion. But what if that rebellion succeeds? If that rebellion succeeds, that would mean that sovereign has lost the power to make sure that preservation of life is ensured. Now, the moment he loses that very power, he also loses the legitimacy to command the obligation. This is what is meant from this very proposition, from this very statement. का मतलब समझ गए आप? अगर कोई रिबेलियन होता है और वो रिबेलियन सक्सेसफुल हो जाता है, सोवरेन उसे नहीं रोक पाता, तो ये इस बात का प्रूफ है कि सोवरेन ने वो पावर लूज कर दिया है जिसके एक्सरसाइज से वो प्रिजर्वेशन ऑफ लाइफ को इंश्योर करेगा। और अगर ऐसा होता है कि वो प्रिजर्वेशन ऑफ लाइफ को इंश्योर करने वाले पावर को लूज कर देता है, तो उससे क्या होगा? वो उसी वक्त अपनी लेजिटिमेसी को खो देता है। Now the question is, why Hobbes is not coming out with any restricted sovereignty? Okay, now this is something which is going to be explained here. So according to Robert Capinegro, sovereign power in Hobbes' political philosophy is in principle absolute and without intrinsic limit. Okay, it is so because to recognize any limit in principle would be similar to reduce the state to one among the contenders whose interest it is supposed to mediate. So actually in that very field there are different contenders of power, and then there is sovereign. Okay, now if if there is if any limit is imposed over the power of sovereign, then he gets reduced to all those very contenders who are laying claim to that very power. Okay, now sovereign cannot be reduced to the other contenders of power. Okay, the very office of sovereign here, the purpose of the existence of sovereign is to mediate the interest of these very contenders. Okay, and not to become or not to become like them. That is what it means here. Now this is again very important, Hobbes' theory of law. Okay, so why do we need here, or why do we need to understand Hobbes' theory of law? Because of his famous statement that law is the command of the sovereign. Okay, law is the command of the sovereign. Okay, so understand here. Thomas Hobbes is one of the philosopher of law whose concepts are classified differently. अब यहाँ पास आपको कई चीजें यहाँ पास सीखने को मिलेंगी. It is not about Hobbes' theory of law. It is about different theories of law which have been proposed and how they are different. Okay. Thomas Hobbes is one of the philosophers of law whose concepts are classified differently. He is the supporter of natural law and also positive law. He is the supporter of natural law and also positive law, depending upon the fact that which of these threads of his work is considered exposed. So there is this very thing that is natural law, and then there is positive law. Okay, we are going to see the difference. And now both are present in Hobbes. Natural law is the out of customs and traditions, and positive law is going to be again decided by the government. Natural law in Hobbes' system has a service function to state, civil, or positive law. It constitutes a peculiar pretext allowing to create an artificial but effective legal order. Getting it? So uh, it is going to have a service function. Service function means it is going to help in creation of something where positive law comes into picture. The law of nature is important according to Hobbes only as an impulse leading to the formation of a state. State guarantees peace and existence. Okay, this is something that I have already explained. When a state is created, natural law is no longer needed. Okay, then comes the role of positive law. The only function law is state law, and state law is an example of positive law. In Hobbes' system, law of nature is not executed. Okay, law of nature is not executed. It has only potential existence. Yes, that you have seen in contract. In a state of nature, it does not actually function since it is not secured by sanction. Okay, and sanction will come from whom? From sovereign. Now understand. In this very sovereign state, it becomes part of positive law. Okay, and what is positive law? That is going to be coming from government here. That is a sovereign here, and functions as one. So sovereign law is actually assimilated in positive law in Hobbes' sovereign state. Okay, according to Hobbes, sovereign's decision, that is order, becomes commonly binding law when they are formulated, and they will take the form of positive law. Okay, so sovereign shapes and does not describes a legal reality. So sovereign is actually when he is making decisions in that very act, he is not describing the legal reality, he is shaping the legal reality, and in that sense he is actually coming out with positive law. Okay, so there you see the function of positive law here. Then further, upon announcement of sovereign order, the law comes into being. Okay, see, upon announcement of sovereign order, whenever any order is coming from sovereign, in that very moment, law comes into being. Means this very command of sovereign actually creates the law. And which kind of law is this? Positive law. When by virtue of social covenant, that is contract, the state comes into existence, legal order emerges from non-existence. That is by power of words of sovereign. That is why it is being said that sovereign shapes and does not describe a legal reality. So the very legal reality is going to be shaped by sovereign. Now understand that natural law or customs or traditions attain the status of civil state law when willed and ordained by sovereign. Thus Hobbes makes will of sovereign supreme and ultimate point of reference in all the legal and political matters. In civil society, natural law does not disappear. It is assimilated in civil laws. Okay, that is why it is being said that it depends upon which threats you are going to expose. So, in that very scheme, you will find that both natural law as well as positive law exist in Hobbesian scheme, but mainly it is positive law. Okay, according to John Plummer, when Hobbes says that natural law and civil law contain each other, he is not denying that men may have good grounds for believing that civil law is contrary to law of nature. Rather, he is saying that they should always do what they promised, which was to accept the sovereign's interpretation of the natural law as alone valid. So, even if the objection is that sovereign is not following natural law, this objection is actually infructuous because they have agreed in the first place to accept that whatever sovereign says that is going to be final, and that is why natural law is to be found inherently in something which is coming from sovereign. By definition, that will be positive law, but natural law is inherent in that very idea of positive law in case of Hobbes. They must never use law of nature as an excuse for not obeying the civil law. Okay, Hobbes on religion and state. Okay, now this again is going to be important because we need to understand what Hobbes has got to say on religion and state. So, religious freedom and relation between church and the state was one of the prominent issues in political thought. Okay, that we have been seeing here. Now understand that he, Hobbes devoted almost half of the Leviathan to it, that is religious freedom and relation between church and state. This is going to be found in Locke's idea also. In Locke's theory also you will find Locke's theorizing on religious freedom, that is tolerance and all. He believes in religious freedom and considers that in matter of conscience a man cannot be coerced. So here he's talking of what? Freedom of conscience. Freedom of conscience. Okay. Now, but he says that overt expression of practices of religion in form of worship and propagation are matters of public concern. And that is something which are going to be controlled and guided by sovereign. Okay. A church is nothing more than a corporation governed by the Commonwealth. See, here he is building on something which Machiavelli has already built. Okay, so here you see a further development of Machiavellian theory. A church is nothing more than a corporation governed by Commonwealth, like any other association that comes under it. Okay, so no professor of faith is lawful, no profession of faith is lawful unless it is sanctioned by the sovereign. Okay, so for this reason, it is said that when Buddha was standing at the gate of modernity, it was Hobbes who jumped. Okay, in order to understand it, recall Buddha's concept of sovereignty when he says that sovereign is below the will of God. Okay, now understand why. And there he actually is keeping sovereign below religion. Now, in case of Hobbes, what is happening? That although he's seeing that people have this very freedom of conscience, but even then, profession of faith is lawful only if it is sanctioned by sovereign. In that case, religion is also coming under the sovereign, and there you see the complete theory of secular politics emerging or taking shape. And this is actually the complete theory of sovereignty. Okay, the modern notion of sovereignty is emerging from this very premise where even religion is going to be controlled by sovereign. And this is what I meant when I said that in Hobbes you will find the fullest expression of the principles that emerged in Treaty of Westphalia that was signed in 1648, where sovereign nation states are going to decide the religion of the state. Okay, Buddha was the first person who talked about sovereignty in most systematic manner, but he considered state to be sovereign only in secular sphere and in religious sphere, which authority was supreme? It was church according to Buddha. Okay, as far as religion is concerned, according to Buddha, church will be the supreme authority. But Hobbes made the state sovereign both in secular as well as in religious sphere. Okay, now we will study about individualism. This is important because in order to appreciate political theory of Hobbes and then Locke, you need to understand idea of individualism. So here you can see that individualism is a belief in primacy and supreme importance of individual over any other social group or collective body. Okay, what is the meaning here? It is the supreme importance of individual. Supreme importance of individual over any other social group or collective body. Okay, it is a concept. Okay, as a concept, either may be descriptive or normative. So there can be two version of it. First is descriptive, the other is normative. Now we are going to see in detail what is descriptive and what is normative. As a descriptive concept in the form of methodological individualism, it means individual is central to any political theory. Okay, so individual is central to any political theory. That is something which is to be found in descriptive individualism in form of methodological individualism. Okay, there is a question that Saransh Dubey is asking, sir, is it from IGNU book? Yeah, many of the ideas you will find here, uh, his Hobbes theory of contract, that is coming from the source from where IGNU book is designed. But many ideas and those very ideas which I'm discussing are coming from various sources. So not just one source, but the theory of contact and human nature has been taken from IGNU source because that is one of the most reliable source for mains examination for any optional. Okay, we will continue. So as a descriptive concept, I told you that in form of methodological individualism, it means individual is central to any political theory. All statements about society should be made in terms of individuals who compose it. In a normative concept in form of ethical individualism, it implies that society should be constructed so as to benefit the individual by giving priority to individual rights, needs, or interest. Okay. What is ethical individualism? It means, in practice, depends upon one's view of human nature. So, ethical individualism is going to depend upon one's view of human nature. In its most familiar form, egoistic individualism, that is, market, possessive, or atomistic individualism, stresses upon human self-interestedness and self-reliance. Okay, the individual is the exclusive possessor of his or her own talent, owing nothing to the secure society and being owed nothing in return. Okay, the doctrine of individualism emerged in 17th and 18th century. Okay, so this is the same time period where you saw the emergence of capitalism also. Okay, although the theory of capitalism goes back to much earlier age, but yes, the informed capitalism is emerging with these very theories, which we see the emergence of these theories see in this very age, that is 17th and 18th century. Okay, now it constitutes one of the basic principles of liberalism and has come to be one of the major component of Western political thought. Okay, now methodological individualism has been employed by social contract theorists. Now that is why it is said that methodological individualism, as we just saw it, that is actually common in social contract tradition. Okay, like Hobbes and John Locke, and also by utilitarians like Jeremy Bentham and economists like Adam Smith. So these in these kind of writings you will see different kind of individualism. In ethical principle, what it means, individualism has strong anti-status principles. Anti-status principles means, now when that kind of individual is going to be talked about, is going to be discussed about, then you will see that one has a distaste or detest towards state or its intervention. Okay, so individualism implies negative freedom. Okay, the expansion of individual choice and responsibilities. However, this egoistic individualism has been rejected by socialists, conservatives, and communitarians. Okay, so according to socialists, individualism promotes greed and competition. Yes, because unqualified unqualified individualism is again going to promote greed and competition, because in that very scheme no regard to community is made. Okay, according to conservatives, it undermines traditional values. So conservatives are going to be against individualism because according to them it undermines traditional values. Which kind of traditional values? Traditional values of importance to community. Okay, and humanism, group living, again that relates to community only. Group living. Okay, cooperative ventures. And according to communitarians, individualism is against moral order and collective behavior of the society. And this is something that you're going to again see when we are going to study Rawls' theory of justice. So how they, this is to be found in our chapter, in our syllabus, and when we are going to analyze it, then we will say that how communitarians are going to prove or going to propose that individualism is against their moral order, and collective behavior of state. Absolutism. So this is to be seen as something which is against individualism, okay, in opposition to individualism. Or is it? No. Here we are going to talk about actual power that government is going to wield and what kind of power will actually be qualified to be called absolutist power. Okay, so individualism was another thing, now it is about absolutism. It is the theory and practice of absolute government. Absolute government means government which is unrestrained government. Government is absolute in the sense that it possesses unfettered power. Okay, unfettered power would mean the same thing, that is unrestrained power. Government cannot be constrained by a body external to itself. Okay, so government is not going to be constrained by any body. So, for example, if we take the example of India, then can we say that Indian government is an absolutist government or absolute government? No, we cannot say it because the power of the government is restrained by other institutions. For example, judiciary is there, then legislature is there. So these institutions actually ensure that the Indian government does not enjoy unrestrained, unfettered power. Because of such checks and balances, because of such checks and balances, it is claimed or it can be said that Indian government is not an absolute government. Okay, because of the checks and balances that are there in form of other institutions or other organs of the state like judiciary and legislature. Okay, so absolutist regime aspires a monarchy of political power. I'm sorry, you needed to finish this also. This unfettered power can be placed in hands of monarch or a collective body such as supreme legislature. Okay, so it can be under a monarch also, that is a king. So you can find absolutist power both in monarchy and in other kind of political structures. It can be a government which is ruled by not one but few. So in that sense, it can be found in aristocracy also. It can be found in oligarchy also. Okay, so any collective body or any collective body in form of ruler or in which has been installed as a office of ruler, if it is enjoying unfettered power, unrestricted power, then that would mean what? That would mean absolutism. Now, it differs from totalitarianism. Please understand, this is important. Now, how this differs from totalitarianism, this must be understood. Okay, in totalitarianism, what happens? It is going to be a control over every sphere of human life. And what that would mean? This every sphere of human life is going to include what? First, it can be public sphere. Second, it can be private sphere. And this private sphere can mean various things. For example, family, civil society, and all that. So in totalitarian regimes, what happens? Power is wielded not only in public sphere but also in private sphere, which includes family, civil society organizations, and all other institutions which are not public. Absolutist regime aspires a monarchy of political power, usually achieved by excluding the masses from politics. Okay, whereas totalitarian involves the establishment of total power through politicization of every aspect of personal and social existence. Now, if you say that power or the governmental power is being wielded not only in public but in private sphere, then private domains of life are also going to be politicized. Yes or no? Yes. So that is the effect of totalitarianism. Absolutism was dominant in Europe in 17th century, okay, and 18th century. So if you analyze Hobbes, if I ask a question here that what kind of power you find in Hobbes' sovereign, is it absolutist? Yes, by all means, it is absolutist. Okay, is it totalitarian? Now that is something when one cannot claim. Okay, so it is totalitarian or not? Hobbes is actually not concerned. Okay, but it is absolutist by all means. Next, absolutist rule was justified by, both by rationalist theological doctrines. Okay, both by rationalist as well as theological doctrines. And now we are going to see authoritarianism. What is the meaning of authoritarianism? It is a belief or practice of government from above. Belief and practice of government from above. So authoritarian government is going to believe or stress on hierarchy. Okay, hierarchy will be there, and that is to be safeguarded. It is a belief or practice of government from above, in which political rule is imposed over society regardless of its consent. So first, hierarchy becomes important here, and second, consent is not required, okay, or it is not taken care of. Those very regimes are called authoritarian regimes. So authoritarianism thus differs from authority. Why? Because authority rests upon legitimacy. This is something that we are going to do in detail in our course, and in the sense arises from below. So legitimacy cannot be imposed from above. Okay, legitimacy cannot be imposed from above. Legitimacy can only emerge from below. So it is the authoritarianism which can be imposed from above and not authority, because the basis of authority is legitimacy, and legitimacy comes or emerges from below. I think everything is comprehensible here. So you have seen the difference between absolutism, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, okay, individualism. Okay, so all these concepts are going to be very important in understanding other topics in political science. Authoritarianism is distinguished from totalitarianism and absolutism on the ground that it is primarily concerned with repression of opposition rather than with more radical goal of obliterating the distinction between state and civil society. So the obliteration of distinction between state and civil society is something that is visible in case of totalitarianism. Okay, authoritarianism was dominant in political form in pre-constitutional and pre-democratic societies. Okay, you just saw that authoritarianism signified what? It signified the rule from above, okay, without any regard, without any regard to the consent. Now, if this is what authoritarianism is, then now it is not difficult to understand that this is going to be dominant in political form which existed before constitutional or democratic societies. Okay, so for example, traditional monarchical form was many a times, most of the times, authoritarian. However, the stark authoritarian and democratic distinction is often misleading. Why it is misleading? Because they tend to uh, create confusion, because authoritarian tendencies or authoritarian attributes can be identified even in some democratic regimes. Okay, so you may find authoritarian characters even in democracies, and that is why you see that in democracies it is not guaranteed that every time you are going to get a leader who is going to respect the consent, the mandate of the people. Okay, so there also in Plato you have seen demagogues emerging in democracy, and those demagogues actually turn out to be authoritarian. Okay, finally, authoritarianism has also been viewed as a socio psychological phenomena. Understand it. This is the final aspect of authoritarianism that we need to know. With a disposition to obey the order unthinkingly. Okay, so authoritarianism is also about socio-psychological phenomena. Okay, where what is the implication here? Implication here is this, that it is going to propel individuals to obey the order. So this actually becomes the emphasis here. Okay, so it is understood that sometimes being authoritarian would also mean being insistent in getting people obey the order. Okay, so one who is authoritarian is also a person who insists on getting the obedience from the people. Now we are going to evaluate Hobbes. Okay, so whether Hobbes is individualist or absolutist, this we are going to see. Okay, so according to Sabine, Hobbes is greatest of all individualists. Okay, and we have seen two different kind of individualism, and now we are going to see that both kind of individualism are present in Hobbes. Okay, so Sabine says that Hobbes is greatest of all individualists. A contradiction in Hobbes' theory emerges because Hobbes starts with natural rights of individuals, but restricts them to create a viable civil society. So, natural rights of individual is the basic premise here. But for the sake of the creation of civil society, those are restricted. He respects natural liberty of men, but does not espouse individuals' right to restrict the authority of the state. Okay, it may appear contradictory that Hobbes is individualist as well as absolutist at the same time, and there are reasons behind it why he is so. However, there is no contradiction in his individualism and absolutism. Okay, so this is a good way of presenting Hobbes' theory, that many times it may become appear contradictory that Hobbes is individualist as well as absolutist at the same time. But there is no contradiction in his individualism and absolutism. So when he's proposing individualism or talking in lines of individualism, it is very clear. And when he is becoming absolutist, that is also very clear. And there is no contradiction here because when he is being individualist, there is a reason for it. That is the preservation of life. And when he is being absolutist, again there is a reason for it, that only in a completely sovereign state that preservation of life can be ensured. So you can say that Hobbes' concern is individual, and the device that he comes out with to ensure that that very concern is actually regarded, or that uh, he becomes free of the concern of the individual, that device actually is absolutist. So in order to fulfill his convictions for individualism, he comes out with absolute government. So ultimately his intention is what? To secure individual interest, or to secure the welfare of individual. This is again clear when he allows individual to disobey the sovereign when that sovereign is not able to safeguard the interest of individual, especially his right to life. Okay, so as a methodological individualist, he keeps individual at the center of his theory. Okay, so we just saw that what does methodological individualism means. In this kind of theory, individual is at the center of theorization. Okay, because Hobbes is keeping individual at the center of his theory, that is why he is methodological individualist. Now see, the absolutism in Hobbes' theory is not akin to unrestricted despotism. Okay, according to him, purpose of a state was safety and well-being of the individual. So even if he is coming out with any absolutist kind of regime, here the purpose of uh, Hobbes is to secure the interest of the individual or the well-being of the individual. Now see, he also maintains that safety of the life does not merely mean their preservation. So he is not going to take safety lightly. So safety is going to be interpreted in wider parameters. It would mean what? It would not mean bare preservation, but will also include what? All the contentments of life which every man by lawful industry, without danger or hurt to commonwealth, shall acquire to himself. Okay. Hobbes was not explicit on such containment, but these are analyzed later. Okay. Those who admire Hobbes have discerned this in this a distinct element of liberalism. And what is that? That when individual is being given the freedom to choose all the contentments of life, okay, to enjoy all the contentment of lives, it is not containment, it is contentment. I'm sorry for the typo here. Contentment of life. Okay, so that is why it is being said that a distinct element of liberalism is visible when Hobbes' individual is allowed to choose, to select, to enjoy all the contentments of life if it is not in contravention with any law of the state. Those who admire Hobbes have discerned in him, for this very reason, a distinct element of liberalism. Now understand that in Hobbes' Leviathan, individual, although coming under the absolute power, does not loses his essential significance. Okay, so the basis of absolutism in Hobbes' theory is radical individualism. Okay, so when he comes out with absolutist regime, the intention here is interest of individual. Okay, in Hobbesian scheme, for a sovereign ruler to be strong as possible, it's best to conclude this ruler as single body composed of all people. Okay, this is, I think this is clear by the discussion that we had. The combined strength of every individual in society is what gives Leviathan its power. So again, it is actually the individual who together are making the sovereign more powerful. ओके, इस चीज को समझिए यहाँ पास ये इंडिविजुअल हैं जो टुगेदर ये इंश्योर कर रहे हैं कि जो सोवरेन है वो पावरफुल बने. इसको दूसरी प्रोपोजिशन से कंपेयर करिए आप कि इन Hobbesian scheme sovereign sovereign's power is not the result of installing an all powerful body from above. Okay, so what is the case then? इस चीज को फिर से समझिएगा. आई थिंक यू आर फॉलोइंग इट. अगर आप नहीं समझ में आ रहा है तो आप क्वेश्चन कर सकते हैं. So what is the case? The case is this, that the power of sovereign, the power of sovereign is emerging from below. And what is the meaning of this very below? That individuals who together constitute the state. So I think I have made everything clear here, and that is why it is being said that even in the absolutist regime, Hobbes is actually favoring what? The interest of the individual. If we imagine Commonwealth taking on a human form, then Leviathan is its head. The rest of the body is composed of every individual within Commonwealth and each has a role to play. Okay, so फिर से समझिए इस चीज को. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? It would mean that every individual within Commonwealth has and each has a role to play. This would mean what? individual does not loses significance even when he agrees transfer his natural rights and comes under the absolute power of sovereign absolute power of sovereign. So even then individual is not losing the significance. Now see, each man is significant in commonwealth under Leviathan. Okay, the Hobbesian man does not lose his existence importance even when he is under the, as I just explained you. Not only that, Leviathan derives its legitimacy from the premise that Hobbesian man's life is secure and safe. Now, if you recall the discussion that I had, the moment Leviathan, that is sovereign, loses its power, secure the life of individual, he loses the legitimacy to rule. Okay, again understand, this is important. And at the point अब मुझे लगता है कि आपको पूरा पिक्चर क्लियर हो गई होगी कि एब्सोल्यूटिस्ट पावर अगर क्रिएट कर भी रहा है तो उसका ये अटेम्प्ट इस वजह से है कि उसे लगता है कि एक एब्सोल्यूटिस्ट पावर क्रिएट होने के बाद ही इंडिविजुअल को ट्रू सेंस में सेफ्टी, सिक्योरिटी और प्रिजर्वेशन ऑफ लाइफ मिल सकती है। ओके, इसलिए वो एब्सोल्यूटिस्ट का पावर क्रिएट करता है। ये एविडेंट है इस फैक्ट से कि कभी भी अगर वो एब्सोल्यूटिस्ट पावर एंजॉय करने वाला सोवरेन अपने मोस्ट बेसिक फंक्शन में फेल होता है तो इंडिविजुअल को फुल फ्रीडम है कि उसे हटा के वो दूसरे को सोवरेन बनाए या उसे कम से कम डिसओबे कर दे। तो अगर हॉब्स एक लेवियाथन क्रिएट भी करता है, एक बहुत बड़ा एब्सोल्यूटिस्ट पावर क्रिएट भी करता है, तो उसका मकसद सिर्फ और सिर्फ इंडिविजुअल की लाइफ को उसकी लाइफ को सिक्योर करना है। और अगर ऐसा नहीं कर पाया तो हॉब्स ये इंश्योर करता है कि तुरंत के तुरंत उस एब्सोल्यूट पावरफुल एंटिटी के सारे पावर्स खत्म हो जाए। मुझे लगता है अभी समझ में आ गया होगा आपको. दिस इज आई थिंक clear now. And for this very conviction, he is actually the champion of individuals' self-preservation. And his absolutist regime is what? It is just a mechanism to ensure individuals' self-preservation. Okay. Now we'll see Leviathan is useless as a book of politics and fruitless as a book of history. Vaughan. So Leviathan, as I told you, is the most important work of Hobbes. वॉगन का ये क्लेम है कि ये यूजलेस बुक है अगर पॉलिटिक्स की बात करें और फ्रूटलेस है अगर हिस्ट्री की बात करें. तो ये आपको एक जो राइट अप आपको सामने दिख रहा है ये उसको एसेस करने के लिए. ओके. तो हॉब्स एक कंट्रोवर्शियल फिगर था. वो मतलब अपने टाइम में कंट्रोवर्शियल फिगर ही रहा. एंड लेवियथन बहुत लोगों के द्वारा हेट की जाती थी. चर्चमैन के लिए हॉब्स क्या था? एक गॉडलेस एथीस्ट था. और रिपब्लिकन्स उसे क्या मोनार्किज्म से चार्ज करते थे. और मोनार्किस्ट क्या बोलते थे? वो बहुत एक डेंजरस स्केप्टिक है. क्यों? क्योंकि वो किसी भी वक्त उस मोनार्किकल फॉर्म गवर्नमेंट को एंड करने के लिए सजेस्ट कर सकता है अगर उसे लगे कि इंडिविजुअल की लाइफ प्रिजर्व नहीं है. तो देखिए, Hobbes was one of the greatest architect of modern state along with Machiavelli, and to some degree he was even more modern than Machiavelli. जब हम सोवरेनिटी की बात करते हैं स्टेट की तो वहां पास वो मैकियावेली से भी ज्यादा मॉडर्न है क्योंकि मैकियावेली तो तब भी एक प्रिंस को एडवाइस दे रहा था. ओके. So this is, I think, is easy to understand that when he's coming over with his state of nature theory on the basis of the state of nature, ये वॉगन का चार्ज इसलिए गलत है कि वो कोई हिस्टोरिकल अकाउंट नहीं दे रहा है कि इवोल्यूशन कैसे हुआ. ओके. वो ह्यूमन नेचर के प्रिमाइस को जानने के लिए और उसके बाद उसको जानने के बाद उसके प्रिमाइस से रिजल्ट होने वाली जो कंडीशन है उधर पहुंच के आगे जो डेवलपमेंट है उसके वो बारे में थ्योराइज करने के लिए फिलोसफाइज करने के लिए वो ये डिवाइस यूज करता है. ओके. तो इसको सिर्फ इसलिए गलत बोल देना स्टेट ऑफ सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कभी हिस्ट्री में हुआ नहीं, वो पूरे पॉइंट को मिस कर देना है. उसकी पूरी थ्योरी के पॉइंट को मिस कर देना है. ओके. हॉब्स खुद कह रहा है या हॉब्स से अगर कोई पूछे कि भाई एट विच very moment in which year, okay, which place this very social contract was signed, he will laugh it off and he will say that this is not actually the point. Okay. So social contract is not to be understood as something which has any anthropological or historical significance. It has a philosophical significance. It has a significance in political philosophizing. Because state of nature, if you recall, is actually emerging from the condition, from the features of human mind. It is emerging from what human nature is actually is. Leviathan is not only masterpiece in political philosophy, but also an acclaimed masterpiece in English prose. Okay, Hobbes is regarded as the father of modern political science. It is he who, for the first time, expounded absolutist theory of sovereignty and originated positivist theory of law, which was perfected by analytical jurists of 19th and 20th century. Okay, so these are the questions in Hobbes. And then we are going to continue our discussion because now after having a discussion on Hobbes, it would be very easy to understand Locke. Now these are the questions that you can actually attempt very easily now. Okay. So if you like the video and you are planning for any kind of subscription, then you can use this very code, that is Amit PS, in order to get 10% discount. That was all for this very class. We are going to continue with our discussion on Locke in the very next lecture.